Can everybody hear me okay?
Yes.
I tend to walk around a lot, so I probably won't stand. I won't stand in front of that. So, my topic today is hypnosis for higher self-awareness. And what is self-awareness? How do we know when we're self-aware? And what are we aware of? So as we look at the truth, what I know about myself, who I say that I am. The interesting thing about it is everything that I say about who I am, I've learned in some way, shape, or form. I am nothing more than the story I tell about who I am. If I am not happy with that story, I have the opportunity to change that story and live a different life. That doesn't mean it's easy. We all know that. Anybody who has followed the path of self-improvement and self-empowerment knows just because I start walking that path doesn't mean that it is a golden road. There's a lot of mud, there's a lot of obstacles, but those are the things that we encounter to help us grow into the person we envision ourselves to be. But that truth, say in this moment, the story I tell about who I am, it may be, when we look really close, it may actually be built on a bunch of lies. And not intentional lies, but lies that are just things that I took on growing up. It could be the cultural soup that I grew up in. That life always has to be a certain way. I have to do a certain thing. We have a certain dinner on Sunday because that's what it is. So that must be true because my entire life growing up, that's what it was. Or we can't eat certain foods or do certain things on certain days. It's all a story. Who am I? What did I learn from my parents? What limitations did I learn? And as I took on those limitations as a belief, were they really my limitations to take on? Or did I carry someone else's limitation that was projected onto me? The funny thing about that, all of those things, those limiting beliefs, in a strange way are always trying to help us. And everybody in this room has probably heard, what you resist persists. So the more I try to ignore that story or just that's not me anymore and push it away, the more it comes on and it gets worse and worse and worse until I recognize that it's there to help in some way, shape, or form. Maybe I've worked with clients who are entrepreneurial and in the heart of it, they don't have a fear of failure, they had a fear of success. Because when they succeeded, they had to be different people. And in that comfort zone of life, I know what's here. I know what's inside this eggshell I'm living in right now. This is great. It's comfortable. I don't know what's on the other side of it. That's scary. Even though it might be a wonderful pasture with more chickens that I can be fed every day and run around and do my little chicken things. If I stay in this eggshell, I know I'm safe right now. But eventually what happens inside that eggshell if I don't move out of it? I will suffocate in place. It's a wonderful metaphor for how we live our lives. We stay stuck in the knowing of who we are, who we say we are, living that story without changing the page, turning to a new chapter, and living the life that calls us forward. So, do you believe yourself to be weak or powerful? Maybe in some aspects of your life you feel weak and in others you feel powerful. What's the difference between those two things that you feel powerful in one place but feel weaker in another? Why is that there? What's the story? What's the lesson to be learned in this place where I tell myself I'm weak? Because confronting is the wrong word. Examining that space is your opportunity for your greatest growth. And as we step into that fear, there's a wonderful YouTube video of, just forgot his name? Will Smith, jumping out of an airplane a couple years ago. And friends had said, oh, we just did this tandem jump and it's great. It's like, you jumped out of a perfectly good airplane. No, I'm not interested. And they're like, you gotta come, this is amazing. So they shoot the video of him driving up, going through all the preliminaries, getting on the plane, and right up to that moment when they're ready to go out the door, there's no way, I am not leaving. And they jump out, and the initial shock, but then the exhilaration that's on his face through the free fall and through the floating, and when they land and they're talking to him at the end, it's like, this really, any fear you have is just a constructed story, and your biggest fears are the opportunities for the greatest growth. Step past that fear, step into possibility and abundance. So what do you believe you can or cannot do? You think about, Ford said it and Confucius said something very similar. The man who believes he can and the man who believes he cannot are both right. Which one are you? Because in a universe of infinite possibility, you can achieve anything you want. You just have to take the steps to make it happen. I may never run a 4-minute mile, but I'd love to run a 6-minute one again. But I have to go out and exercise and do it. It's not just going to happen when I'm binge watching Netflix and eating a pizza. So what am I in alignment with? Because why do I binge watch Netflix and eat pizza? Because it feels good. After a long, stressful week, hey. But is it serving my growth forward? It's probably serving my growth here, but it's not serving my growth into the person who can run a 6-minute mile. Those limiting beliefs. Anybody here have that little thought, maybe sometimes comes up as a voice in your head, not in a spooky way, but like a voice in your head that says, you can't do that. What do you think? Who's experienced that in some way, shape, or form? That thought, any soundtrack in your head that is telling you you cannot do something is lying to you. It is your ego. It's the limiting beliefs. It's the learned personality of who you believe yourself to be. It is not coming from your higher consciousness and your soul, whatever you want to call that entity, connecting to the higher, whether you call it God, universe, source. That is the truth. That will never tell you limitation. It may give you a warning to be careful, but it will not tell you that you are incapable, because it comes from love. So lies cage us. You can't do that. You can never be a successful business person. Or maybe in a family that has a story of lack. Instead of growing up in a family with a story of abundance and seeing opportunity, maybe somebody grew up in a family, the story was lack, there was constant struggle. When that story is passed down generationally, and that experience of the parents who maybe grew up during the Depression is turned over to the children, and they take it on as a truth because they always hear it. It must be true. It comes from these people I trust, called my parents. I begin living that way, or that person begins living that way of seeing waiting for the other shoe to drop. How many people have heard that phrase? Something good happens to me, so therefore I have to be waiting because the other shoe is going to drop. There is no other shoe, and there never has been. Maybe you got a bonus at work, and that $5,000, yes, this is great! And a week later, the transmission falls out of the car. Coming from lack, we tend to construct a story of I was punished. And some of us in certain religions get indoctrinated into the punishing God. I've been punished because I succeeded in some way. I was gifted something, I have to pay it back. What if you change that story? It's really just a narrative that I'm making up between two unrelated events. Got a raise, transmission fell out of the car. Only common denominator is me in that story. If I'm going to if I am going to construct the story, why don't I make it an empowering one that this loving, giving, God source universe actually knew, because it has no concept of time. Everything exists. It sees all possibilities. It knew my transmission was going to fall out, and it gifted me that money in advance. Isn't that a much more empowering story to tell than something could happen, I'm going to be punished? So I'm instead of always being on the lookout for where's the fail, what's going to come, what's hanging over my shoulder, living in fear in some way that keeps us from living in abundance. You know what? Thank you. I appreciate that. How does all this tie into hypnosis? Glad you asked that question. So learned limits are the things that we've taken on. I already mentioned that through the stories we just are indoctrinated to in culture and family. They keep us scared in our comfort zone. If we look out in this forest, there's the light that we're heading toward, that ideal in some way of what life should be, how I should be experiencing it. But then there crops up that limiting ego that's going to scare us back away, keep us in the forest in the dark so we can't step forward. As you step into, actually as you are stepping out of those limitations, how did you learn them? How did you learn the story? There's two ways, particularly two ways, that a belief is impressed into the subconscious. Typically in a moment of shock, in a car accident, even a child reaching for a hot stove, and the parent, in wanting to protect the child, grabs their hand, slaps it, and says, bad. Bad's value judgment. Now, that curious child who had no concept of what the hot burner would do is thinking, I'm bad for wanting to explore. When no and an explanation would be a much more empowering response. Stressed out parent, it happens, I understand. But if that happens over and over and over, we get repetition. And it could even just be snide comments. I'm always hearing things like, there's never enough money to go around. Every time you get a dollar, somebody's going to be there to take it away. I lived that life for a long time. I would get a bonus at work. Transmission would fall out of the car. I'd get an extra paycheck. Oh, there's a bill from the state for car renewal. It just happens to be like just exactly the same amount of money. How'd that work? When I shifted that story and became aware of it, I was talking to my sister one day, and that incident with the car tax came due. Don't even know why I mentioned it. And as I said it, her response was, yeah, you can never get ahead. Every time you get a dollar, somebody's there to take it away, and blah, blah, blah. I just had this litany. Thank God that litany took place as I was going through hypnotherapy school, because I was starting to step out of where I had been stuck for so long, lost in these woods, and realizing there was something else outside of it. And it suddenly hit me that she could not be saying the same words in the same order, in the same cadence that were in my head, unless we learned it from the same people. And in that moment, I realized it wasn't my story, and I could let it go. So what are those limiting thoughts that are floating back here that may sound like your voice, but it's really somebody else's words? And guess what? They're not yours. You don't have to live those limitations. As we look at hypnotherapy to move out of this space, we can break down and replace these limiting thoughts in the same way, through repetition. It's the heart of suggestion work in hypnotherapy. When I'm working with clients, initially the first session will be a set of suggestions. We'll talk for typically about an hour, maybe an hour and 15 minutes, so I really understand where they're at and where they want to go with life. What are their words for the ideal? It has to be their words. And then I'll craft anywhere from 10 to 12 suggestions using their words, positive affirmations, that once we relax down to that place of where they are in hypnosis and fully aware, when you're in the hypnotic state, you are not checked out and gone. That is just a bunch of stage crap. I'll just put it out there. I don't like stage work for that reason, because it puts out the misconception that the client doesn't know what's going on. And a lot of times at the end of their sessions, and you don't remember anything that happened on this stage. That's disingenuous. It really irritates me, you can tell. It really irritates me. So as part of my count out, when I'm bringing a client back to their regular waking awareness, part of that count out is you remember everything from this session. Because it's not therapy if you don't remember what you worked on and processed. That you can carry it forward and continue that healing. But we'll present those new affirmations of success that are in alignment with the client's goal, so they can listen to that recording over and over, and in the same way the limiting belief was impressed, now working in the deep hypnotic place, it goes directly in. It doesn't have to filter through the conscious mind and says, this doesn't work for me. It'll go straight in. And study done back in the late 90s, early 2000s by American Health Magazine looked at the success outcomes of traditional talk therapy, behavior therapy, and hypnotherapy. My numbers will be really close. I don't know that they're exact, but they're really close. So, success outcome of traditional talk therapy was 28% after 600 sessions. Weekly sessions, that's 12 years, with only roughly a quarter of success rate, because it has to filter out through the conscious mind and bubble back. It takes time. Behavior therapy was something like 73, 76% after 22 sessions. tripling the success rate and knocking the time down to roughly 6 months of weekly work. Not bad. Pretty impressive. Hypnotherapy, 93% success rate after 6 sessions. Because it doesn't have to bubble back. We're going straight to the subconscious where beliefs, emotions, all those old stories are held. Your subconscious is always recording. It is aware of things going on in this room that you are not consciously aware of. It's allowing you to breathe. It's controlling your body temperature. It's controlling your heart rate. It just runs. Unfortunately, as a recorder, it also tends to pick up on things that aren't helpful, and then it runs that loop over and over and over. I mentioned earlier, all those things are there to help us, and that may sound a little weird. So how is that limiting story that I can't get ahead, I can't be successful, I can't get out of my way financially, how's that helpful? Any ideas on what the protective device could be there? You're avoiding risk. There is that, so it's keeping me safe from avoiding risk. That is one opportunity. Any others?
It allows you to be right.
Yes. And right, going further, right about what and with whom?
Right about your beliefs about yourself.
That I learned from my parents. Right. That as part of a family unit, I want to fit into the family unit. Because as a child, as an infant, if they leave me, I'll die. And even up into like 5, 6 years old, because most of these things get impressed by the time we're 7. As a child, I can't take care of myself. I have to rely on these people to keep me alive. They must be telling me the truth because I hear this stuff and I see it happening over and over and over in my house. So I want to be like them. I want to fit in. As an adult, believing that I can't achieve financial success is not a helpful belief in any way, shape, or form. What's my payoff? Oh, I can commiserate with the family. We've bonded now in our misery because misery loves company. Stepping out of it, realizing that my parents want me to be successful, and that's their story, their experience. They grew up during the Depression. They had a very different experience in their youth than I did. But they carried that story forward. We carry those I hesitate to use the word curses, but those generational curses we carry forward. And we just continue to embody them until we come to the place of awareness that it's not mine. If you are living a story, if there is something in your life that is not helping you move forward toward the ideal of life, take a good look at it and ask it why it's there. Seriously, ask it. Ask that little voice, why do you tell me this? It will, as you ask down, it probably won't come forward right away with the full answer. As you ask down, it might take 20 times. What's your intention? Why are you telling me this? It will always come back around to it's there to benefit you in some way. Because it's there to keep you alive, but it took on that story when you were 5. It doesn't work at 53, or even at 40 or 20. So hypnosis allows us to have direct dialogue with the subconscious. Who's familiar with the model of the mind as an iceberg? Okay, so 10% above the water line, 90% below. 10% above is the conscious mind, the 90% below is the subconscious. The water line in that diagram is an element called the critical factor. Critical factor is part of the conscious mind, and it's a filter. It doesn't allow anything to enter into the subconscious that's not in alignment with what the subconscious believes. So let's say somebody grew up with a story of they just couldn't have a happy relationship. They saw terrible relationships in their family, their parents didn't get along, parents were always complaining about each other. Oh, this must be what marriage is like. Oh, okay. And they go out and they meet people. And they get drawn to people that fulfill that story. And they start to learn, I'm not good enough. I can't have a happy relationship. My parents didn't have it, and now I'm proving it to myself. I can't have one either. This must be true. This must be what life is like. You could be sitting with them after their most recent breakup and telling, you're a wonderful person. I don't know why you can't find them. You're so great. You do so many things wonderfully. You're going to meet the right person. They hear it consciously, but it's not in alignment with that story they tell themselves about I can't be successful. And it's literally in one ear and out the other. It never sinks in back here because it's not in alignment. That protective device is saying, we can't let that person know that they can be successful, because that just doesn't mesh with what we know. What we know is relationships have to be terrible, and we have to be right. If I'm wrong, what am I? So when we're in that space of that dialogue, and again, the client is fully aware, we can understand where they came from. Maybe we do a childhood regression, spontaneous childhood regression, or I do work called parts therapy, where we'll actually talk to that part. If anybody's ever said, there's a part of me that wants to do this and a part of me that wants to do that, we can talk to those two parts and understand why they want to do that, where they learned their job, and what they're interested in out of those two outcomes. Typically, as I said before, it's a belief that's impressed in childhood. It's just taken on as a mistaken belief. Once we know it's a mistake, from an adult perspective looking back, we can take on a new outlook and realize that my parents really did love me, they want me to be successful, but it's their story, I don't have to take it on. I've also had some really interesting sessions where that thought pattern was literally not the client's, and we had to clear it away so that they could step into a space. I'll get into that more in the second part of the presentation. But any thought that is telling you that you are limited in some way is a lie. And as you connect back into the truth of who you are as a spiritual being having a physical experience, you can step into abundance as you align into that, and you can write your new empowering story, the story that aligns with the goal that you have. Because if you are sitting here, or at any point in your life, you feel something, maybe the word I would use is a bit of angst or existential crisis. I know it can be better. I don't know exactly how, but my life can be better than it is right now. If you've ever felt that, that is your higher self calling you to say, things can be better. And you're not living your full potential right now. If you've never experienced it, it will be coming. But think about this, even friends, maybe you've had that discussion with. If you don't have, you may not have an exact picture of what that ideal life is, you have a sense of it. But if you're living in a space that is not fulfilling, how do you know it's not fulfilling? You have to have some comparison. So even if you don't know what it is, it's there, or you wouldn't be feeling this angst and crisis. Because otherwise, hey, life is great. There's nothing to compare to. As soon as, if I've been eating vanilla ice cream all my life, great. As soon as somebody tells me there's mint chocolate chip, I want to be over here. But until I have the comparison and know there's another opportunity, I just deal with it. It's like vanilla. Okay, it's bland and it's boring. I want the chocolate chip story. So from that place of self-awareness, as we understand the limiting thoughts are not mine, and that I can reprogram them, we can become a conscious co-creator of our life. Get clear on what you want, get clear on the actions that it will take to get you there, be prepared for the obstacles along the way, because they will come. You will be challenged, because if you're not living that story yet, you have not yet evolved and grown into the person that is the successful version of you in the future. There will be trials and tribulations and fire to get you into that place, because you will rise like a phoenix from the ashes to become that new person. And as a conscious creator, you can choose. Do I want to live in that old pattern that hasn't served me, but it keeps me kind of in my place, it's semi-comfortable here? Maybe it's still a little scary out there. I can choose. I don't have to stay there mindlessly. And if I decide that I want to back up for a little bit and take a break, because this has been a much harder journey than I thought, I can do that too. But I can bring it from a place of empowerment and awareness, rather than, okay, yeah, just waiting for that car engine to fall out next time, because I know transmission's been fixed. That means the next bonus, it has to be the engine. So now, as we become self-aware, I want to shift the punctuation of this. Not just higher self-awareness, but higher self-awareness. Stepping out of this place of this limiting story, I can now step into my connection to the spiritual me. And hear it clearly, not through the churn of this mind that tells me I'm weak and limited and all those other things. I can connect into abundance and the messages coming from above. Connect into the heart. And think about the heart of coaching in the way that I teach it. I teach a course for the Certified Life Coach Institute in Orange County. And the heart of coaching comes from the work, the idea behind the way the ICF does it, comes from the work of Virginia Satir and Milton Erickson. The client is okay. They are not broken. This is not therapy. Client is okay and has all the tools and resources they need to live their empowered life. Object of me as a coach and also as me as a hypnotherapist, my job is to be obsolete in my client's life as quickly as possible. That's not doing the work sloppy and getting out. It's doing the right amount of work for the right amount of time that they are self-empowered in living their life in the way that they want to live it. It's not about me, sleep now, go do this. Doesn't work that way. Does not work that way. So as we get in tune, as we get the churn of the limiting thought out of the way, and we connect into our awareness, we know what's right for us. You think about I can do A, or I can do B. I can go to that party on Friday night where I don't like those people, or I can stay home and do laundry and binge watch Netflix. That feels a lot better to me. I think I want to say no. I'm going to stay home and enjoy myself. Because I can meditate, I can just get reconnected. As you get into that space of the soul in you that is calling you forward, you can truly manifest your life of happiness and success much more easily than fighting all the limitations going up here. Because when the ego mind is quiet, you can hear that deeper calling. It's there anyway. If you're feeling that existential crisis, it's coming through. How do you change the radio station over, get through the static and start hearing the message? Because it is there. So we ask for divine guidance, whatever that is for you, however you want to call it. Align with your intuition. As we grow up, we're told not to honor our intuition. We know what's right for us. As kids, watch kids play. They know. They tend not to have filters. And then we're told we can't say certain things. Don't do it that way. You have to do it this way because I'm your parent and I said so. And we move away from honoring our gut instincts. When we get back to that place of honoring our intuition and being really in tune with it, life becomes so much easier. Because now I'm living into my ideal, honoring myself, rather than this story that I learned from somebody else that isn't mine. We can connect to that deep inner knowing. Because it's there. You are aware of it. Cool. Back up. So, as we look at what questions do you guys have about the process? Yes?
How would somebody prepare themselves to come to you, at least just in the beginning, to seek you out? What would they do?
They would typically find me online. They would have that sense of something's wrong. Maybe they've tried other work in the past. Maybe they've been to counselors, therapists, and some of it stuck, but it hasn't quite. This pattern keeps coming up, keeps evolving. I need to do something different. I need to get to the heart of this. And they hear about hypnotherapy. So they'll find me in that way and we'll have a discussion, typically about 20, 30 minutes, just to see where they're at and what are their goals. I want to know, where are we going? In a way, it's like going back to Stephen Covey's book, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People. The chapter in there about begin with the end in mind. I want to know where we're going. Because we can take the emotional energy and we can do this with it, which is how we tend to live our lives, just spinning in circles, not knowing what we want. But as soon as we know where we want to go, then I can harness that energy forward. We would love to think that we're rational human beings and we make decisions rationally. We make decisions emotionally. The weird thing about that, when was the last time you made a good decision when you were in a highly emotional state? But there's a harmony. There is a harmony. The strongest emotion always wins. And that's something I talk to my clients about a lot. When that place that we're going to is the ideal future, when we are connected to that emotionally, to a really high sense that I want to be able to run a 6-minute mile again, I'm going to feel great, I'm going to be thinner, this will be fantastic, I'm going to feel so good. The immediate gratification of that pizza and Netflix doesn't pull me to the side. When this really good pizza, New York style, cheese, chewy crust, when that calls to me and I'm not connected out there, like, yeah, come on over, how you doing? Bring it on. Strongest emotion always wins. So if you find yourself derailing toward your goal, and that pattern is coming up, as you become aware of it, what's the intention behind that pattern? It's trying to serve you in some way. Maybe it's to tell you that, it's been a long day, it's been a long week. You can kick back and just relax. You don't need to go run. Have a good time. This is your comfort for the week, for having done such a great job. Okay, that's great. Thank you. I recognize that. But I really want to go out here. And when I'm connected there, this doesn't have power anymore. Not the same power. Maybe like a 1 weekend out of the month power instead of 4 weekends out of the month. Other questions? There and there.
Some of us are in magical fraternities or other fraternities.
Mm-hmm.
We're asked not to be hypnotized. What do you have an answer for that? Or do you have like a counter argument to that?
So if you can answer, my question is, can you tell me why you are asked not to be hypnotized?
Because we were given, certain secret information was imparted.
Okay.
That could be uncovered, or
Okay.
There's also something of a brute mind that might be shared in a way that
Okay.
some people would want.
So my response to that is, if you, as an ethical, honorable human being, would never divulge those secrets, you cannot be hypnotized to do it. Hypnosis is not truth serum. If you don't want to tell me something, I can ask you all day long. You will not divulge it. It doesn't work that way. As much as I despise Wells Fargo, I can't tell somebody, go rub the bank. Bring me split it with me, go do it. If they are not inclined to do that, you cannot be hypnotized to do something that is against your moral code or your ethical code. You are fully in control the entire time.
Actually, I've been involved with other organizations that encourage therapy, so it's also the other way around. But that's not my question. You stressed the influence of parents on our development. I would imagine there's also the element of social and peer pressure that shape us and limit us in many ways. Find your therapy encountering that and having to cope with it. How do we rise above that?
The same way, the same story, and I do see it happening, particularly now. I grew up in the 70s and 80s before social media, thank God. I can't imagine what it would be like as a youth today, whether even teenage years are bad enough, but now I've got all this other stuff of comparison. What was that show on MTV, the Sweet 16, like these outlandish 16 birthday parties? What precedent is that setting by showing it? That if my parents can't give me that, I must be in some way less than. That it's all just this social construction. And I tend not to go too far into deep conspiracy, but there's something about messages that keep us in confusion and thinking we are less than. What's the use of it? There isn't one, unless somebody is benefiting from it. And it's interesting that this is coming up, because in hypnotherapy school, one of the things that I learned, who's seen the instant inductions where somebody's like shaking a hand and the person drops? Okay, those are real. Those are real, they really do happen. The reason they happen, the science behind it, is that as social animals, when we are in confusion, we look for a figure of authority to tell us what to do. So part of that induction is, and there's lots of different ways to do it. Standing, you'd be shaking a hand, and you'd pull on the arm just to throw the person slightly off balance. And in that moment, sleep now. The word sleep in English means only one thing, and they obey. And I even hesitate to use the word obey. They follow the response. Seated, client is seated in the chair, have them raise their elbow off the arm of the chair and press down on my hand. As I count down 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, getting them to stare into my eyes with my hypnotic gaze. And when I get to 1, I pull my hand away and they do that. And that's when I snap my fingers and say, sleep now. And they instantly relax back to that place. And then through the guiding them deeper to get to where we will do our work. Again, I'm going to go back to it. What's the point of our confusion? And as we get into awareness, once we become aware that the messages that are out there, these highly polarized messages that we get through media, through social media, through our friends and family, think about polar responses. And I'm not going to go into the ones that are out there. Black and white. Let's keep it as simple as possible. Black and white. Any polar response cannot be wholly true. It can have a portion of truth to it, but it cannot be whole because there's another whole thing over here that's a portion of that truth. So as you start hearing polar messages, open up to what's the other possibility here. Do I have to believe only this thing? What's the other side of that coin? Is day and night. When does day become night? When does night become day? When does the head of a quarter become the tail? It's the same quarter. Which side of it am I experiencing? Other questions? Yes?
Is it harder or easier per se if it's a more recent event?
Harder or easier
Meaning,
to...
like, so my daughter, for instance, cross country, she got hurt her freshman year and her sophomore year. So now in her junior year, that's still clicking in the back of her head, like I can't be as good because I can't push myself as far because I got hurt previously. So is that an easier thing, or would it be some 40-year-old man that had an issue when he was 8?
Potentially could be. It really depends on the person. And I would say initially my gut reaction is it should be easier because it's been a short period of time. So the shock initially, there'll be work to overcome probably the shock, but the repetition of the story hasn't taken on long enough.
Right.
So it should be easier to overcome it because it hasn't been reinforced for 30 years. It's only been there for a couple.
Right.
And then we go back to that moment probably as part of the, just a regression back to that moment and observing it from being outside of the experience takes on a new way of seeing it. Does that answer the question?
Yes.
Hand and then hand.
How do you answer concerns about the dangers of mesmerism?
Tell me about the dangers of mesmerism.
The whole trust of you're opening yourself for someone else to plant some idea into your head.
I can't plant any idea into your head.
Okay,
I
is
cannot
that how
do it.
you answer that when someone has a concern about what's going to happen in your hands?
Okay. So first off, that person would probably never come in because they have that fear. If they come in and they bring it up, the conversation we have
I'm
is...
bringing it up.
Okay. You are fully in control. Even in that relaxed state, you are actually more aware there than you are in this moment. Because in this moment, you're at beta brainwave. As you relax down, maybe we're sitting out in the lobby looking at the trees outside on a sunny day, and 30 minutes goes by and it feels like 5. That's alpha brainwave, daydreaming. Next level down is theta brainwave, which is where most hypnotic work gets done. You are even more fully aware because the churn of this story, all the conscious thought, is just off to the side. You know everything that's going on in that room. You are connected to your past. You are connected to everything in the moment and fully in control. If there's I don't want to go dark on this, but say there's a traumatic, something happened in the past that's very traumatic and the client doesn't want to go back and experience it or even see it, they don't have to. We can facilitate around it. They are fully in control, and just as I said over here, I cannot hypnotize you to do anything that you wouldn't do normally. You are fully in control, and you're fully aware. If I say something that you don't agree with, you don't have to accept it, and if we really don't have rapport, you are in so much full control that you can open your eyes and walk out the door.
Okay,
Does that answer the question?
I think so.
Okay.
I was going to ask, is there any, like, what, self-hypnotherapy that people use for healing? Or does you always have to have a coach or a guide?
You can learn self-hypnosis. It's similar to meditation, so getting used to relaxing into that state. The difference between the two is I tend to see meditation as a clearing of the mind, where hypnosis, if we're going to self-hypnosis, we're going to that same state with a purpose of focusing on reprogramming a limiting belief, or maybe losing weight, something like that, that I really need to target this space, so I'll go in with a targeted visualization of losing weight and getting back to a 34-inch waist. Does that answer your question?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's actually really simple to learn. You get used to listen to the inductions. It's something I can help you with if you're interested in learning. Do those inductions that relax you back to that place and you're fully in control. We have a few more minutes. Yes?
Just really appreciate what you're doing right there. I'm a certified hypnotherapist as well.
Oh, thank you.
Wonderful, wonderful presentation. I do have a question with your practice in general. You said that you're also a coach. Do you find that you're coaching and being a hypnotherapist at the same time, or you kind of keep those separated?
I keep them very separate because I'll use the tools in coaching over on the hypnotherapy side. Particularly reflective listening is so powerful for uncovering. But if the client comes, I have two separate contracts.
Yeah.
If the client signs the coaching contract, we are not going into hypnotherapy because it's not part of coaching as the ICF defines it, and that's where I align myself. One more question.
So I have a two-part question.
Okay.
And they're related.
Okay.
The first is, from what you're explaining about hypnosis, there's some immense implications about the human condition.
I'm sorry.
The human condition. The mainstream is barely begun to scratch the surface on it. So the first part of the question is why hasn't that created just a huge paradigm shift in the human condition? And why isn't hypnosis way more ubiquitous than it is? And second, if it were, would you see an ideal system, one in which hypnosis is very common, which children are receiving it, so that instead of playing janitor, we're actually proactively cultivating people to reach their maximum potential from the get-go?
Yeah, answer the first question very clearly, simply stage shows. People see that stuff going on, I'm out of control. That is what has prevented hypnosis and hypnotherapy from being taken seriously. Because there are people being entertainers with it rather than embracing it for the power of working with the mind. Stepping into it it's slowly getting there. There was a huge study done in France 2 years ago, I think, where they used hypnosis as a replacement for anesthesia in brain cancer patients. They had a 93% success rate. So here's a real application in a study at a respected hospital in France showing 93% success rate. That's the stuff I want to be promoting. And then as that gets going on, I think the next phase is insurance will find some way to cover it as alternative therapies become more mainstream. And yeah, it would be a fantastic thing to be able to work with people at the moment they are beginning to experience that shift, and to also be able to work in coaching forward that maybe my life hasn't opened up to my path yet, but I can feel it. Let's get connected in there now and get you moving forward from a place of empowerment rather than waiting 10 or 12 or more years down the road. That would be a fantastic thing. All right. Thank you very much.